What's up? It's Tom. Thanks for being here. We're going to talk about some late season minor league performances through a couple of different lenses. Just kind of going through some of this information myself as I'm preparing for my end of year prospect list. So I figured I'd kind of relay these. First off, we're going to take a look at all of the trade deadline acquisitions, all the minor leaguers that were acquired and how they did post trade deadline. Not going to review each and every one of these guys. You can kind of look at these numbers for yourself. But obviously, Mick Abel is the guy that really stands out. Pitched extremely well. Actually, I should call out, too, just for clarification, these are only their minor league stats. And I did include Taj Bradley in there, even though he's not prospect eligible. I just figured to be a completist, we would include his numbers with the Saints there, which don't look good. But he had some flashes up with the Twins. Speaking of that, man, Mick Abel's last start of the year, holy smokes. Went into Philly, his old organization, and absolutely dominated. Looked outstanding in that final start of the season. See there, he was excellent with the Saints. He was actually the International League Pitcher of the Year. If you caught my video on the Twins minor league awards, I kind of was bummed out at how little there was to get excited about on the pitching performance side from last season. But that was in the system only. If we zoom out and include some of these guys, Mick Abel, I mean, that's as good of a minor league season as you're going to find a lot of years that he had. I do want to highlight, if I was to say there's a guy who I think is a lot more interesting than his performance in this group, it would be Ryan Gallagher. I'm pretty intrigued by him, although he did not pitch well after the trade deadline. So that was all the pitchers that the Twins acquired at the deadline. Let's take a look at the hitters. Henry Mendez really turned heads in his time in Double-A. 461 OBP you see there with more walks than strikeouts. Again, only looking at what they did after the trade deadline for these guys. Enrique Jimenez is a guy that really deserves some love too as well. I would say he's a guy who maybe doesn't have that profile like Eduardo Tait has a massive prospect profile. Jimenez doesn't have quite that profile, but look at how he performed to end the year for Fort Myers. So he's a little bit further back, not facing as stiff a competition. You got to keep that in mind. But the guy they acquired from Detroit, a catcher, really was amazing for Fort Myers to end out the year. I keep kind of forgetting about Alan Roden, and I wanted to put him on here again just to be sort of a completionist, even though he didn't play in the minors at all, so didn't include any information for him. But as I think about next season's big club, I keep forgetting he's in the mix there, and he's absolutely in the mix for a corner outfield spot. So don't forget about that guy. Okay, we're going to switch gears and kind of change the framing up a little bit to look at in the system internally. Who are some guys in the quote-unquote second half who had good surges, as I'm going to put it, or slumps? We're going to take a look at a handful of each, using the MLB All-Star break as the half. Even in Major League Baseball, that's not truly the halfway point. This is even more true of minor leagues, since most of the minor leagues don't go very far into September at all. So this is almost more, instead of second half, this is maybe more like the last 2 full months of play, you could think of it as. But I've never really used this as a framing reference, and I think it's handy to look at because sometimes guys who didn't have a great year but had a great finish doesn't show up in their numbers. And I think the guys who have a great sort of early part of the year and then maybe fade, we don't notice that as much as guys who do the opposite. So going to take a look at both aspects. Some of these names might be new to you. I'll call them note card guys because I have to bring out my note card because I'm not as familiar with them myself. But Matt Gabbard is a guy who they signed out of Indie Ball. Missed all of 2024, though. They signed him in 2023 at Indie Ball, missed all of 2024. Was primarily like a long reliever this year. 23-year-old right-hander, pitched extremely well down the stretch. 3.18 ERA, sub-1 whip. Walked 1.9% of the batters he faced in those 39 and 2/3 innings. That is quite a roll. Michael Ross was the Twins' 18th round pick in 2024. He is recently turned 23 years old, a guy who logged a bunch of innings for Fort Myers. That's a good sign. A guy who I could see kind of popping up next year and kind of getting more on the radar. You see, look at those numbers, a 2.27 ERA, 1.09 whip. He was great. Adrian Bojorquez, that's more of a guy, if you watch this channel a lot, who might be more on your radar prospect-wise. He's a guy I've had in my top 30 Very intriguing arm. You see there a 28.1 strikeout percentage as a starting pitcher, kind of getting accustomed to Cedar Rapids for the first time. He's very intriguing. Andrew Morris, you want to talk about watching this channel. If you watch this channel, you've heard a lot about Andrew Morris. I love that guy. Kind of under the radar. He missed some time, but came back and was really good at the end of the year. A 3.45 ERA, 0.77 whip, 24.8 K percentage, a 3.4 walk percentage. Expect him to pitch in the big leagues next year for sure, on the doorstep. Really excited about Andrew Morris still. Rudy Gomez, another guy who is a note card guy, we'll put it that way. Signed out of Indy Ball, 40.5 K percentage, 0.39 ERA, 0.69 whip. This is a guy who's a reliever, but he has more of like a starter's repertoire and depth. Like he's a 4 or 5 pitch guy. So, in the pitching in the A-ball, that's really going to give hitters a lot of trouble and not getting, multiple chances to see him. So he's another guy that's kind of just put on your radar, and we'll look for him next year to see if he can keep that rolling. On the other side for pitchers, these are the slumpers. Again, organized by innings pitched. You might be shocked to see C.J. Culpepper on there considering he had a 3.32 ERA, but take a look at the rest of it. A K percentage just under 17, a walk percentage of 14%. Those two numbers fairly even. You don't want to see that. And the 1.48 whip isn't great either. So there are certainly worse performers I could have put on here, but I'm kind of trying to feature guys who maybe are kind of a little bit more surprising. Basically, I didn't put Corey Lewis and Marco Raya on here because they were just bad all year. So it wasn't like they slumped. They were just bad all season. So you know what I mean? Christian McLeod also had a rough end of the year. Connor Prelip, who was the Twins' choice for minor league pitcher of the year, a 4.62 ERA, 1.56 whip, 11.4 walk percentage in the year. Again, those aren't, you can find much worse performances across the minor league system in the second half, but just kind of want to call out that this guy wasn't exactly surging. But maybe has like I haven't looked it up yet, but he probably had one of the worst BABIPs like in minor league baseball last year, Connor Prelip. So that didn't help him. So keep that in mind. Jared Wharf is a guy who was like in contention for Twins minor league reliever of the year the past 2 seasons, and then really ended rough this year in AAA. Kind of a thing where he with all of these doors opening in the bullpen, might have thought that he was the guy that was going to get a shot eventually, but, it didn't work out that way, and he did not pitch very well. Then Dylan Questad, who I'm intrigued by his stuff, but he cannot throw strikes. And when he was throwing strikes early this season for Fort Myers, looked very intriguing. I was getting pretty excited about him, and then it just all, those numbers speak for themselves. I don't have to say anything more about that, but he's looking like he might not even get out of A-ball at this point. Switching gears to hitters, Kalai Rosario. I took kind of the same approach here. I should call out that like Walker Jenkins had an amazing second half. Kyler Fedko, Gabriel Gonzalez, but those guys had incredible years. So I didn't include those guys on here. I think Jenkins led the system in hits in the second half. Again, we're saying after the All-Star break essentially. But Kalai Rosario, he didn't have a bad start to the season, but really soared in after the All-Star break, a 965 OPS. Ben Ross, this is a perfect example of what I was saying about how a strong finish is easier to go under the radar. I didn't realize he finished this strong. And you might say, well, it's only a 789 OPS. It's not anything crazy, but he hasn't really hit that much. And this is a guy who's a very good defensive infielder who's also played some center field now with, a lot of the infielder like Kalen Culpepper taking over at shortstop there. He's got some more positional flexibility. So I'm kind of back intrigued on Ben Ross again. Yasser Mercedes, another guy who I didn't realize finished stronger than his numbers are. He didn't light it up or anything, but certainly played much better down the stretch. Maddox Houghton, who is known as a really good defensive outfielder, that's kind of his bread and butter. So to view it through that lens, that 776 OPS is pretty encouraging, and he's certainly going to continue to get chances and develop. Jake Rucker missed a lot of time early in the year, an 830 OPS down the stretch. He's a guy with another infielder with some positional flexibility. Both Ross and Rucker, those guys have been in Wichita forever. I hope they can get to St. Paul next year. Ben Ross with 254 games in Wichita. Jake Rucker with 326 games for Double-A Wichita. So hoping that late season surge maybe puts him in the mix to potentially get up to St. Paul. Though he's got to keep it going. He didn't have a great season, but he's a good. I think he's won some some of the Harmon Killebrew Community Service Awards in the past and things like that. So good dude. Good to see him finish up well. The slumps. Kyle DeBarge, this is one that kind of maybe went a little bit under the radar. He was still stealing bases, but he wasn't as successful. He never got thrown out early in the year. He did get thrown out a few times on his attempts in the later year here, and then you see there, pretty rough go of it. A 610 OPS. Danny DeAndrade, also with Cedar Rapids, did not finish strong. Unfortunately, he's a guy I'm a pretty big fan of, but kind of hard to see. Hard to look at what he did this year and be too excited about it. Aaron Sabato hit quite a few home runs. His first 20 games after getting called up to St. Paul were unbelievably good. And then you could see he still did slug, to be fair, from the All-Star break on. He did still slug, a .429 slugging percentage, but it only came with a .220 batting average and a .251 OBP. So it's a .680 OPS. So, some people were wondering if maybe he was a potential solution at first base. I think we're not there yet. Pancho Ruiz, who had a really good start to the season, he fell off quite a bit. He struggled down the stretch. Carson McCusker, and he was kind of bouncing around a little bit. Finished the year up on the big club, but uncharacteristically poor minor league numbers from Carson McCusker there. It was only 116 plate appearances, but still, that's pretty shocking to see him post a 649 OPS for that stretch. So, again, kind of was looking through this stuff to get brushed up on and prepared to release my end-of-year prospect list. That should be coming very soon. Let me know what you think about all that. We'll talk again soon.